Hello everybody, and in this recording we're going to be practicing using some CVP equations that we have. Again, a lot of these equations or variations of equations stem from either the basic CVP equation, variable rate equation, contribution margin, or contribution margin rate equations, and they're just variations of those. Pen up. Okay, so this question, we're being asked to calculate the dollar sales price using the following information. Our variable costs of $10.19, I imagine this is per unit, and a variable rate of 29 cents. Now, if we think about it, sorry, I'm just pulling up the pen again. I thought I did, but I didn't. Okay, so our variable rate is equal to our variable costs divided by our sales. Okay, if we rearrange this by bringing our sales variable to this side of the equation and our variable rate to this side of the equation, we have to multiply the sales over and then divide the variable rate over to the right hand side, which results in an equation that looks like this. Our sales price equals our variable costs, this is not very good, divided by our variable rate. Okay, so now that we have the proper equation to solve for this question, we just plug and play with some numbers. Our sales is equal to $10.19 divided by 0.29. Now I'm kind of doing this on the fly right now, so I've got to pull out my calculator and figure it out. So $10.19 divided by 0.29, or 29%, is 33.13. Sorry, 35.137. And in this case, we would round this up to be 4. So in this case, C would be correct. 35.14. Okay. Let's move on to the next question here. Alright, question number 5. We are being asked to calculate our contribution margin using the following information. We have our sales of $967,111 and our variable rate of 33%. Okay, so we're being asked to calculate the contribution margin. Our contribution margin is equal to our sales minus our variable costs. Okay, in this particular example, we know what our sales are, but we don't know what our variable costs are. But we're given our variable rate. Okay, and again, if we want to find our variable costs, we look at the equation for our variable rate. Our variable rate equals our variable costs divided by sales. Do we have our sales? Yes. Do we have our variable rate? Yes. And we can now isolate for our variable costs. Okay, so we rearrange this equation by taking our sales and multiplying it to the other side. We get our variable costs are equal to our sales times our variable rate. Okay, so in this case, our variable costs are equal to $967,111 multiplied by 0.33, which comes to equal, and again, sorry, I'm using a calculator for this, $967,111 multiplied by 0.33 comes out to be $319,146.63. Okay. Going back to our contribution margin formula, we now have our sales, well, we had them before, but we now have our variable costs, so we can now solve for our contribution margin. So our contribution margin is equal to $967,111 minus $319,146.63, which works out to be 67111. Which works out to be $647,964.37. Okay. In this case, we would select the correct answer to be C. Okay. Our next practice question. Ooh, this is a good one. Okay, question number 6. We want to find our fixed costs using the following information. We got sales, we got a variable rate, we have a loss, and we have to find our fixed cost. So to solve this question, let's think back to our basic CVP equation, which is our sales equals our variable costs plus our fixed costs plus our profit. Okay, and we want to find our fixed costs. Are we given our sales? Yes. Are we given our variable costs? No. Are we given our profit? Yes, except that it is a loss. A loss is just a negative profit. Okay. So in order to solve this and find our fixed costs, we'd have to first find our variable costs. Using what we learned from our last question, we know that we just need to multiply our variable rate by our sales to get our variable costs. So our variable costs are equal to our sales multiplied by our variable rate, which equals $234,760. Oops, so I'm going to try and make this look a bit neater. There we are. Multiplied by 0.36. Okay, so our variable costs turn out to be, again, I gotta pull up the calculator for this. 234,760 multiplied by 0.36 or 36%. Our variable costs are equal to $84,513.60. Okay. So now we have our sales because we had it before. We have our variable costs. We're looking to find our fixed costs, and we have our profit. Now we can isolate for the unknown, which is our fixed costs, and solve it. So what you would do is you would bring your variable cost to this side of the equation by subtracting it. You would also bring your profit to this side of the equation by subtracting it. So our fixed costs are equal to our sales minus our variable costs minus our profit. Okay? So our fixed costs are equal to $234,760 minus our variable costs of $84,513.60. Excuse me. Minus our profit. But because we're subtracting a negative number, we would add it. So our fixed costs turn out to be, again, just putting this into my calculator right now. I encourage you all to do the same. Oops, okay. Added it. So our fixed costs come out to be $157,808.40. Okay. So in this case, even though there's a decimal point, we would select C. Again, there's a lot of C's in this. Okay? Alright, moving on down the question list. Okay, question number 7. We want to calculate our variable costs using the following information. We have our sales and our contribution margin. And I imagine that this is per unit. Okay, so in order to solve this question, let's think about our contribution margin formula, which is our contribution margin per unit equals the sales price minus our variable costs. Okay, we know what our sales are. We're looking to find our variable costs, and we already know what our contribution margin per unit is. So what we would do is just rearrange this equation and solve for our variable costs. Now, because your variable costs in this case, there's a minus sign there, we would rework this equation so that it's a positive. So we would move our variable cost to this side of the equation and our contribution margin to this side of the equation. We'd by moving the variable cost to the left-hand side, it becomes a positive, and by moving our contribution margin to the right-hand side of the equation, it becomes negative. So it results in a formula that looks like our variable costs are equal to our sales minus our contribution margin. Okay, so in this case, our variable costs are equal to 15.75 minus our contribution margin of $8.14. There we are, just like that. And if we work it out on a calculator, it should come to 1575 minus 8.14. I put in the wrong number there. 8.14 equals 7.61. So our variable costs per unit were $7.61. And in this case, it's not C, it's B. Okay. Alright, let's continue down the list. Okay. Question number 8. Given the average variable cost of $8.20, again, I must imagine that this is per unit, and the variable rate of 0.3, we want to solve for our contribution margin. Okay. So if we recall our contribution margin formula, it is equal to our sales minus our variable costs. Okay. We are given our variable costs, but we don't have our sales. But with the given information, we can solve for our sales. For instance, let's look at our variable rate. We're given that, and then let's look at the equation. So our variable rate is our variable costs divided by sales. We have our variable costs, and we can and our variable rate. We can rearrange this equation and solve for our sales, from which way we can calculate our contribution margin. So what we would do is bring our sales to this side of the formula by multiplying it, because we're dividing it on the right-hand side. And then we would bring our contribution rate to this side, to the right-hand side of the equation, by dividing it. Because after you bring the sales to the left-hand side, these two items are being multiplied. So it looks like our sales are equal to our variable costs divided by our variable rate, both of which we have. So our sales are equal to our variable costs of $8.20 divided by our variable rate of 0.3, or 30%. So we throw that into our calculator. 8.2 divided by 0.3, and we get a sales price of $27.33 repeated per unit. So there we go. We got our sales, we got our variable costs. We can now calculate our contribution margin. So our contribution margin is again our sales minus our variable costs. Our sales are 27.33, and our variable costs are $8.20 per unit. There we go. So we do the math, and we get a variable, a contribution margin. Sorry, I did that with too many threes. 33 minus $8.20. We get a contribution margin per unit of $19.13. Okay, which in this case is A. All right, moving down the list. Oh, that's a good one. Question number 9. Given fixed costs of $95,000, a target profit of $25,000, a variable rate of 0.4 or 40%, what is the dollar sales volume required to achieve our target amount of profit, which in this case is $25,000? Okay, so let's look at our break-even formula. So our break-even for a desired amount of profit is our fixed costs plus the desired amount of profit divided by our contribution rate. Okay, do we have our fixed costs? Yes, we do. 95,000. We have our profit. Awesome. But we don't have our contribution rate. What we do have, on the other hand, is our variable rate of 0.4. Now, if we remember that our variable rate and our contribution rate are two pieces of a whole, then we can take our variable rate and easily find our contribution rate. Okay, so our contribution rate, or one way of calculating it, is 1 minus our variable rate, because again, our variable and contribution rate are two pieces to a whole. So if you take the whole minus the one piece, it must give you the other piece, or the value of the other piece. So we do that. 1 minus 0.4 equals 0.6. So now we have our contribution rate, and we can solve for our break-even, our break-even and desired amount of profit. Sorry, I said that wrong. We can solve for the amount of sales that we would need to achieve that target amount of profit. So let's do that now. Our break-even with desired profit. I'm just adding TP for desired profit there. Is our fixed costs plus the amount of profit we want divided by our contribution rate, which turns out to be 95,000 plus 25,000 divided by 0.6. Now if we throw that into a calculator, first we add the top part of the equation, so 95,000 plus 25,000, we get 120,000 divided by 0.6. And now we do the division, so 120,000 divided by 0.6. We get a sales level of 200,000. Okay, so 200,000. In this case, we would pick C again. What do I have to say about this? It's important to know that with this particular break-even scenario, we really have to add the profit in, or else it would just be a break-even scenario. Yeah, I think that's all I would add with this. Another good one. Question number 10. Given sales of 120,000, variable costs of 48,000, and fixed costs of 60,000, what was our profit, or what is profit? Again, we have to go back to the basic CVP equation. Our sales equals our variable costs plus our fixed costs plus our profit. Okay. So we know what our variable costs are, we know what our fixed costs are, and we know what our sales are. We need to find our profit. But before we do that, let's rearrange this equation so that we can isolate for our profit. And again, what we would do to do that is send our variable costs to this side of the equation and do the same with our fixed costs. And in doing that, they both become negative, so we would subtract them from sales, which results in a equation that looks like profit equals sales minus variable costs minus fixed costs. Okay, so our profit then must equal 120,000 minus our variable costs of 48,000 minus our fixed costs of 60,000. Now let's put that into our calculator. Our profit equals 120,000 minus 48,000 minus 60,000. Our profit in this case equals $12,000. Okay, and we would select A as the correct answer. Okay, question number 11. We are given a sales price of an item and our variable rate, and we're asked to calculate our contribution margin. So again, let's check out the equation for our contribution margin. It is equal to the sales price, or I guess we're asking for the contribution margin per unit. So it would be the item's sales price minus our variable costs per unit. Okay. Now there's two ways you can do this question. I think I'll show both. Let's just start with the first way, using our variable rate. So if we look at our variable rate, or sorry, before I even go that far, we're looking for our contribution margin. We're given our sales price, but we don't have our variable costs. So we have to calculate our variable costs. Now if we use our variable rate formula, we have our variable costs divided by sales. That equals our variable rate. Do we know our variable rate? Yes. Do we know our sales? Yes. So now we can isolate for our variable costs and solve for our contribution margin. So our variable costs, if we rearrange the equation, equals our sales price multiplied by our variable rate. Okay, so our variable costs then must be $11 multiplied by 0.4, or 40%. So let's do that on our calculator. Our variable costs equal 11 multiplied by 0.4. So our variable costs equal $4.40. Okay, so now we got that. And our sales price, we can calculate our contribution margin. So our contribution margin is our sales minus our variable costs. So $11 minus $4.40 works out to be $6. I guess I could have done this in my head. $6.60. And in this case, it would be C, so we would select C. Another way you could do this, because there's multiple, everything's connected with CVP. So there's, in terms of completing these questions, there's not one set way to do it. As long as you can arrive at the correct answer using the appropriate variables, then you're good. So I'm going to show you another way that you could have approached this question. I'm actually just going to erase some of this so I have some room. Okay, so I'm going to erase this as well. Sorry, just give me 1 second. I just want the room to be able to do this. I'll erase this as well because we no longer need it for this way. Okay, so again, going back to the contribution margin formula, our sales equal our our contribution margin equals our sales minus our variable costs. Now, our contribution margin is also equal to our sales multiplied by our contribution rate, because our contribution rate is our contribution margin as a percentage of sales. Okay. To arrive at this particular formula, we look to our contribution rate formula, which is our contribution margin divided by sales. So all we're doing to isolate for our contribution margin is bringing our sales over to the left-hand side of the equation and multiplying it. Okay. So using our contribution margin is equal to our sales minus our contribution rate, we would have to find our contribution rate. We are given our variable rate. We can easily solve for our contribution rate because our variable rate and our contribution rate are two pieces to a whole. So one minus the whole minus a piece equals the other piece. So in this case, our contribution rate is equal to 1 minus our variable rate. Okay, which equals 1 minus 0.4, which turns out to be 0.6. So 1 minus 0.4 is 0.6. So our contribution rate is 0.6. So going back to our equation here, we have our sales, we now have our contribution rate, we can solve for our contribution margin. So our contribution margin equals our sales times our contribution rate, which equals our sales price of $11 multiplied by our contribution rate of 0.6, which turns out to be $6.60. So we two different ways we've arrived at the same answer. And that was the last question. If I guess some guiding words about questions like this is, or like a key to success about solving questions like this is, this is a bad example, is look at the information that you're given and really understand that the variables or different pieces of CVP are connected. They're all connected because it's a consistent situation. Nothing changes, right? So it's how you work these equations that will make you successful or not. So again, let's not look at that one. I want to get one that has the variable rate or something like that. This one looks good. Okay, so again, you're given your variable cost. We're asked to find the contribution margin, and we're given the variable rate. Key to understanding and being able to solve for these situations is really understand the information that you're given and how it can be used to solve for the unknown. For instance, the key to solving this question is knowing the equation of your variable rate. Okay? So yeah, practice taking these equations and rearranging them. I'm also going to do a quick little thing down here. Now let's look at, I'm going to bring up our CVP equation again. So sales equals our variable costs plus our fixed costs plus our profit. This might get a little weird, but I hope that this will help you understand. So when we're talking contribution margin, we're really talking about our fixed costs and our profit. That equals our contribution margin. When we're talking about our variable rate, that is, and our variable costs, that is obviously our variable costs. okay, or even our contribution rate. For instance, if we were to rearrange this equation to isolate for our fixed costs and our profit, we would take our variable costs to the other side, which would result in an equation that looks like this. Our fixed costs plus our profit equals our sales minus our variable costs. Now, what is the equation for our contribution margin? It is our sales minus our variable costs. So, if this be the case, logically speaking, our fixed costs plus our profit should equal our contribution margin. We could even sub that in. And if we wanted to talk about this in terms of variable rates and contribution rates, our sales being 100% of our sales, our 1 must equal, or 1 being our sales, must equal our variable rate plus our contribution rate. If you were to rearrange this to solve or to isolate for either your variable rate or your contribution rate, your variable rate would be 1 minus your contribution rate. And if you were to do it the other way around, if you were to isolate for your contribution rate would be equal to 1 minus your variable rate. Okay? That might get a little confusing. We'll work on it a lot in class just to make sure we're solidifying this knowledge so that it's usable and useful. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Let me know if you have any questions.